Thank you for staying with us. The Independent National Electoral Commission announced the postponement of the governorship and state assembly elections, earlier scheduled for this Saturday. The postponement was due to the Commission's inability to promptly commence reconfiguration of the bimodal voter accreditation system machines utilized during the February the 25th presidential election. Senior correspondent Femi Akonde has details.
After the Court of Appeals ruling granting the Independent National Electoral Commission permission to reconfigure the bimodal voter accreditation system, it became almost clear that INEC will need more time to reconfigure more than 176,000 beavers. The Court of Appeal had granted the People's Democratic Party, the Labour Party, and their respective candidates Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi's request to inspect all sensitive materials used in the conduct of the recent presidential election. The two opposition political parties rejected the election results in which INEC declared the All Progressives Congress candidate Asiwaju Bola Tinubu as winner. They called for the conduct of a fresh poll. They also approached the court seeking permission to inspect all sensitive materials and restrain INEC from tampering with them. But INEC approached the court on Monday to seek permission to reconfigure the beavers. This request was only granted on Wednesday, 2 days to the election. INEC says this approval to reconfigure the beavers has come far too late. The Electoral Commission will also need to be better prepared this time around in terms of logistics and other arrangements that will enhance the conduct of the election. But this is not the first time INEC will shift the date of an election. In 2015, the election was postponed by 6 weeks due to insecurity. In 2019, the current INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, announced a postponement of election with just less than 24 hours notice. The postponement of the governorship and State House of Assembly election may have caused a bit of inconvenience and altered arrangements already been made to vote on Saturday, but it will also give candidates and political parties more time to campaign and canvass for votes. Femi Akonde, TVC News, Abuja.
Well, joining us from our Abuja studio is a political analyst, Michael Oluwagbemi. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
INEC has a rich history of postponing elections. In 2011, in 2015, and the likes, we have seen INEC postpone elections. But this time around, this is generating divergent reactions and is seeming like it's not sitting well. This postponement is not sitting well with a majority of Nigerians. What do you sense with regards to this postponement?
Yes, thank you again, and good morning to your viewers. I think, by and large, Nigerians have somewhat come to factor in the likelihood of INEC postponing elections, at least for the last 2 cycles since we started applying some reasonable level of technology, starting with the PVC card reader, verification reader in 2015, and up to this point when the beavers require reprogramming. However, in defense of INEC, I have to say that these particular postponements seem to have been brought upon it by legal issues associated with the inspection of materials that were utilized for the 2023 presidential and national elections, which include presidential, senatorial, and the House of Representatives. But it's also not I think INEC should have prepared for this reality. Should have known that the beavers will constitute some level of evidence that political parties are likely to challenge the reconfiguration of beavers, and should have prepared logistically and in terms of the having alternate beavers available for these centers prior to the election. However, I think the courts, of course, have saved the day, agreeing with INEC that the backing up of the BVAS data into the INEC server and is well protected and should ensure that any evidence associated with data from a particular BVAS will be preserved in the cloud or in the service, and such server will be under the custody of agencies of government that's responsible for securing sensitive information of that nature. So I think while INEC had been brought upon it, I think it could have prepared better, it could have anticipated this outcome. But again, it's a blessing in disguise for candidates, as your correspondent mentioned in his report. Some candidates will have more time to canvass for votes. I don't think that's bad for Nigerians. In democracy, the quality of our decision is as good as the information we have. And since everybody's being subjected to the same postponement, I think candidates should take advantage of the opportunity to let the public know their platform and their programs that they have for Nigerians, especially in view of the results of the elections 2 weeks ago. That shows definitely that power is definitely firmly back in the hands of Nigerians with their voters' card, and Nigerians will respond accordingly to programs and the pitch of candidates that think that time is worth it.
Do you think that there was something unforeseen that happened that made this reconfiguration possible, that perhaps the INEC authorities are wary of disclosing?
I mean, I would take INEC for their word. I wouldn't get into the conspiracy theory as to why and how INEC is unable to do the elections this Saturday. But it's very clear to anybody, any discerning mind, that 2 or 3 days is very difficult to not just reconfigure those BVAS, but then to redeploy them. There's 2 parts to it. You have to reconfigure the data. You have to back up the original data. These activities should have started immediately after the last election. But of course, because of the court order to restrain INEC from reconfiguration and the case that was argued all the way up to the Court of Appeal, this activity is quite involving. It requires, of course, backing up the original data and then reconfiguring it and redeploying it again. I think it takes considerable time, and 2 to 3 days is not enough. So regardless of all that conspiracy theory, I would take INEC at their word, and I think that's sufficient. As anybody can understand that a country as vast and large as Nigeria, across over 8,000 electoral wards and over 176,000 polling units, this will have been an Herculean task to achieve in 2 to 3 days. But then again, I would boil down my criticism of INEC to planning and anticipation of the political behavior of Nigerians as a political authority and regulator itself. You should know that nearly every election in Nigeria is contested because the Nigerian electoral loser is generally litigious, and it's a case that these cases should be expected to go to court. And human planning, human design, human-centered design should have factored this in. And I think a double of what the BVAS that was originally ordered should have been ordered, regardless of the cost. And this should have been factored into even the cost factor, and potentially will have brought down the overall cost if you're ordering double the volume as well. So this could have been done to prevent us from going through another embarrassing postponement. But here we are. I mean, we have to, when we're given lemon, we have to make lemonade out of it. I think the politicians and the political actors, as well as the people, has been enduring many weeks and months of political campaign. I think 1 week is not too much to ask of them.
I was also trying to do a follow-up to say that the number of people who had PVCs 95 million or something, or 93 million or so. And they should have anticipated work for 90-something million. But we had only 20-something million who did it, and they still had to go through this problem.
Yeah, so I'm the way I look at the data is a little different from the way most analysts have looked at it. I do not think that Nigerians experienced a low voter turnout at the last election. And hear my thought out. Nigeria has 3 million people that have been enrolled on the PVC, permanent voters card roll. And this data had been captured since 2010, 2012, after the last electoral reforms by President Yaradua and, of course, finalized by Goodluck Jonathan. The result of that process means that we've been having this current voters register for the last 10 years plus, almost 12 years, if you like to say. If you look at the death rate of Nigerian adults between the ages of 16 and 66, which constitute the vast majority of the people on this voters roll, is about 333 out of 1,000 over a 10-year period, which means that a third of the people that are on this roll statistically are expected to have been dead by now. So that means that the actual people, the living residents on this voters register today, is about 62 million. We take 2/3 of 93 million that is supposedly on this data. If you subtract out people that potentially may not be able to vote by reason of moving, ailment and all of that, you're looking at, in terms of effective likely voters, you're looking at about 60 million people on the voters roll. So if you have 25 million of them show up to vote, as they did last 2 Saturdays ago, during the national election, that gives you over 40% voter turnout. This is about the average in democracies across the world. The democracies across the world typically experience between 30 and 35% voter turnout, because let's remember that a third of the population just cannot vote because they're election officials, they're judges, they're security officials, they're journalists like yourselves who will be handicapped by election day duty, and then you have another third who simply have decided they won't vote, and then you have a third that will vote. So Nigeria eating at about 40% of likely voters is actually a high turnout rate. It's simply because INEC does not purge the voter roll of dead voters, that's dead registered voters, is the reason why it appears as if Nigerians have a low voter turnout. On the other hand, I also have to mention that during these elections, we also have to understand that the voter turnout, the lower turnout relative to the last election is simply because we now have begun to do accreditation. The elimination of a lot of ghost voters that used to vote in our elections at the court. Now, because everybody that has to vote has been biometrically identified and they have to be living being, is why you have seen the collapse of total number of voters from 2015, despite the fact that 2015 we had PVC, to 2019, and now to 2023. I think we're beginning to get an actual number of voters, because everybody that was accredited last 2 Saturdays ago would have been a living being at the minimum. Now, there's something different to say about those people who voted, but at least those who were accredited, which is the 25 million people, we are setting their actual living human beings that were biometrically identified. And that's the reason why we have seen the reduction in the numbers of voters. I do not buy into the voter party theory. I do not buy into the theory of Nigerians not believing in their own democracy. In fact, you see that Nigerians are probably more engaged today than 2019 and 2015. And then yet you are seeing a lower number of people that are voting. It tells you that the beavers is having a positive effect. And then when you look at it in the context of the overall voter roll and the actual in terms of people that are probably not alive, then you realize that Nigerians actually do not have a bad voter turnout. So we have to look at these statistics and we have to interrogate it as a student of democracy and also a student of numbers. When I look at this number, that's what it tells me. It doesn't tell me Nigerians are not voting. It tells me that real Nigerians are now voting, and politicians have to take note and ensure to speak to real Nigerians. And maybe INEC will also look down the road on how to sanitize
Oluwagbemi, we need to go on a commercial break. When we return, we'll continue this conversation with you. Do stay with us. All right, thank you for staying with us. We've been speaking on the matter of the postponement of the governorship election, and we've been speaking with our guest who is in our Abuja studio, Michael Oluwagbemi. And before we went to the break, Sam, you wanted to ask a question?
Yes, I was saying that you actually didn't get the question I was asking. I wanted you to clarify why INEC prepared for 93 million PVC holders for the election, but found it difficult to keep the system together for 24 million. That's why it's hard to do the reconfiguration.
No, not at all. The reconfiguration is not because it cannot keep the system together for 25 million. Rather, the reconfiguration is required because let's remember that whenever the data was captured 2 weeks ago, it will capture those people who came forward to accredit on that day. In order for you to reuse that same beavers, you need to wipe out the old data. That is first by uploading the previous data to the server for safekeeping. And then you now have to reconfigure that same beavers for use in the new election so that it can capture the new data fresh. So without reconfiguration, you cannot reuse the beavers, whether it's for 95 million or for 25 million. So the reconfiguration is not because it cannot keep it together for 93 million or for 25 million. It's basically what is required if you are using the beavers for a fresh set of election. So for every new election, even elections that were rerun, the beavers had to be reconfigured. I mean, the elections that did not take place on Saturday, some took place on Sunday. You need to refresh it, reconfigure it. You need to make it read 0 accreditation so that it can be utilized at a previous time. And therefore, there will be a timestamp, a date stamp for that day and for that particular event, capturing, of course, also the GPS data. And that all of this will go into the backend server as a proof of the authenticity of the data that was captured that day. And then if you need to reuse it, then you have to go back to reconfigure it.
All right, Michael, in politics, they say that a day can mean a lot. A lot can happen in 1 hour, a lot can happen in a day. This postponement of elections, how will this impact the campaigning for political parties from what you see? Will it change anything? Will things remain the same or something?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, a day is almost like a year in politics, especially the last few days of campaigning. Anybody that has been in that, I've been part of a few campaigns at the highest level, and I understand how very psychologically unnerving the last few days can be for candidates. However, it also provides opportunity for some candidates that might feel that they've not had sufficient face time with their voters to engage with that voters. And I will also tell candidates that think they have, and their opponents feel they've not, to take heed for the last few days of campaigning. So I think a lot can happen in a week. The additional week given an INEC can lead to what could have been a win, change a win to a loss, and change a loss to a win easily, and turn some very easily called races to become tightly contested. I think some of the dynamics in the country, including the ongoing fuel and currency crisis, also have an impact, because the longer voters are subjected to some of these pressures, the more they don't tend to be as angry as when they just started to feel it. So you have to understand these things around political psychology to understand the impact of this timing and a change of time on the elections that is forthcoming.
So what impact do you think this will have, perhaps, on the turnout of voters come March the 18th? Because leading up, like Sam mentioned earlier, the turnout of voters was said to have been lesser than we usually recorded. There are those who are saying, leading up to the governorship election, with the initial date of the 11th, there were those who were not going to come out, or there were those who are going to have protest votes. What do you see with this extension of the election now?
Yeah, again, I would go back to say that I do not think voter turnout went down. I think real voters actually came out. And I think the way we measure voter turnout is wrong. It should be based on resident living voters. And I think Nigeria did quite fantastically well with around 40% 2 weeks ago. That said, I think those people who will vote. Generally speaking, depending on local issues, because let's remember that these are local elections. So voter turnout vary widely state by state. We have easily about 8 or 9 locales, 8 states and the FCT that does not have governorship elections. So they only have House of Assembly elections. In these locales, we tend to experience a tumble in voter turnout since voters are more excited about executive position elections for governor. So states like Ekiti, Ondo, Kogi, Edo, Anambra, as well as a few other states across Nigeria and the FCT do not have governorship elections. So I do not expect them to experience higher voter turnout. Rather, I expect them to have lower voter turnout in the upcoming election. In the case of FCT, there's no election at all because there's no governorship and the municipal election is not next week. So therefore, when you look at the overall basket of voters that will vote 2 weeks after the presidential election, if you just take the number of voters that voted in all of these elections, just because you have these 8 states and at least the Federal Capital Territory that doesn't vote, you will expect to be a lower number of voters overall. But some locales, some elections that are tightly contested, like we've seen in the 2011 elections, for example, that elected Governor Fashola, that you actually had an increased number of voters between the national election and the state election. So in the case of Lagos, and I think Lagos State's election this year again is being hotly contested, you might actually find an increase in the number of voters rather than a decrease. But overall, as a country, I think you will find less than 25 million people will vote next week election. That's the expectation. Now, in terms of this postponement, again, it will vary state by state. States that are already prone to not have higher voter turnout because they just have House of Assembly elections will probably have even lower voter turnout. States that were already looking like they're going to have higher voter turnout, like Lagos, might end up actually experiencing the same or more. So again, it's going to vary state by state. I always say that in 2 weeks, in a week time, during these state elections, the subnational level election, is when you realize very quickly that Nigeria is a federal country with diverse people, and one size does not fit all. And it's a spirit of federalism that we also have to do our analysis. And I would say that I expect a diversity in terms of what voter turnout will be and the impact of this postponement on it.
Well, you have seen that the number of people have come out to say that they don't believe that the election was fair. Do you think that even this reconfiguration itself will create another momentum for those who lost to say it was reconfigured for rigging?
Nigerians we are special creatures. I think we even if we got some angels to conduct our elections, I'm sure we're still going to have quite some disbelief and litigation. At the end of the day, I think the court weighed the evidence before it, as it should. Why should INEC not be able to utilize the same device, and why should the nation be burdened with additional cost of procuring more beavers when the data from the current beavers, at the end of the day, is a digital data? That's the reason why we're using that machine, is because it's digital and it's not manual, and we can save data from it in a safe way and also have what we call digital footprint. So the court has weighed the evidence and has weighed the arguments of the lawyers and have determined that reconfiguration is the way to go. I do not think that people who have deemed that if they do not win, then the election is rigged or the election should be cancelled and rerun, can be convinced, even if you continue to wait for another set of beavers to be procured from wherever it will. I think at the end of the day, the onus is on us as a people, as Nigerians, to understand that whenever we have complaints about election, we have only one place to go, the judiciary. The judiciary has shown over the years that it can be trusted. The reason why we have, by the way, about 8 states that are now having elections next week, the governorship elections, was because the judiciary overturned several governorship elections between 2011, even between 2010 and 2015. And the judiciary even last week Friday, showed that it's not afraid to rule against the sitting president and to require that the sitting president reverse his policy based on the hues and cries and the litigation of the people. So I think instead of us litigating in the press, in media and all of those stuff, those people who have any problems with the last election should go to the court and should plead their case to the justices who in their wisdom are saddled with a responsibility of not just interpreting the law but to do justice. At the end of the day, I also think that we have to look at the facts of that election. When people say, oh, by the way, you should cancel or rerun the national election, but I want to keep all my Senate seats. I want to keep my FCT Senate seat that led to also dislodging a sitting senator who had been in power for more than 3 terms. Or an election that I won in the territory of the sitting president, the candidate of the ruling party of the ruling party, the director general of the campaign of the ruling party, as well as the national chairman of the ruling party. I want to keep the results in those areas, but I want to have a rerun in the areas where I did not win. That smacks of mischievousness. I call political mischievousness. And of course, when you look at the opposition, to be honest, I laugh a lot when I looked at a lot of the programming that had gone on in the last 10 days, when you actually have both parties, both leading opposition parties, the PDP and the Labour Party, actually claiming victory, and both of them claiming they actually have results to show that they won. And one even claiming to the opt-in time that less than 20 million people, Nigerians, actually voted based on the data they released to the public. Again, you find it quite interesting. So one of the two of them have to be delusional, or both of them are basically not saying the truth.
All right. As it is now, this shift in this election, the governorship election, has caused untold inconveniences for a lot of people who may not even have any interest in the political party. But if INEC should have envisaged this, how best do you think INEC should have handled this so that we don't have this kind of shifts in election? Things are not certain when we are getting into an election.
Yeah, I think the onus of planning is on the INEC leadership. Time and time again, we have seen lapses in planning and strategy, and a lack of understanding of the political behavior of Nigerians from INEC. I mean, INEC, I have to say this, that I always say this, that INEC is the one body in the Constitution that has the responsibility of political regulation. And you cannot regulate an industry, the industry of electoral politics and politics, if you do not understand the behavior of the people that are actually participating in it. INEC, based on its own history and engagements with politicians in Nigeria, should have basically known that this reconfiguration issue was going to go to court, and should have ordered for beavers to ensure that can step in immediately without requiring the old set of beavers to be reconfigured. So I think that there was definitely a big gap in planning, and I hope that INEC continues to take lesson and improve. There were improvements, at least for the first time in 3 cycles. The presidential elections was not postponed, despite many rumors to the effect that it will be. But now we have seen the postponement of the gubernatorial and State House of Assembly elections. I hope next time we can have a smooth sailing election with 0 postponement, because INEC will have done their homework and expect this kind of litigation, and should not sit on its arm and allow life to happen to it. These, I think, are the issues that we need to fix, and the planning and strategy and the political behavior studying and the human-centered design that we expect from INEC. I hope that the INEC commission, the INEC leadership steps up and begin to do more of that.
Now, this matter has put the commitment, truthfulness, and integrity of the Commission, talking about INEC, under question. A majority of Nigerians, are questioning if INEC is really as transparent as it says it is. What concerns do you have with regards to that?
My concerns is first and foremost an issue of communication. I think to the upcoming to this election, INEC totally messed up the communication as required by it to the public in terms of the processes for this election and what is optional and what is mandatory. INEC overpromised and underdelivered, and that is unfortunate. And as a result of that, it has allowed many sore losers, so to say, to use that inability of INEC to meet its extravagant promises as a tool to say that the election was not free and fair, despite being easily one of the freest and fairest elections in the history of Nigeria, given that we know that for the first time in Nigeria's history, all the 25 million people accredited to vote on that day were actual humans. This cannot be said of any previous election, because everybody that voted, including myself, was biometrically identified before we voted. We cannot say that about previous elections. And even the outcome of these elections, like I've already shown, shows that it's, by and large, it was an election that was well policed with technology. And even if there were lapses, because of the digital footprint occasioned by the use of beavers and the use of transmission of results electronically, which is different from posting of results on IREF, by the way, may I mention, as left some digital footprint that will enable any litigant to go to court to obtain any kind of a malpractice at their polling unit level. So I have to say that INEC, by overpromising, for example, by saying that IREV, which is required not under, and again, this was proven by a court case that was brought by Labour Party August last year and was decided this week, that INEC is, number one, not required by law in the Electoral Act, Section 62 and Section 65, read jointly, to transmit results electronically. No, rather that section gave INEC the right to actually conduct the election and decide the manner in which it wants to transmit results. And then INEC had decided a manner in the guideline, in the INEC Electoral Guidelines, Section 28, and provided for both electronic and manual means of doing so. And the electronic means had always been private, haven't been tested and test-run by INEC for the past 3 years. So everyone going around and saying, oh, by the way, our inability to read data on IREF is the same thing as electronic transmission, are missing the point. And also missing the point that, in fact, if INEC is not able to transmit electronically, the law does not make it compulsory, mandatory, or the only system of transmitting. Manual system was okay, and any party that has a different manual result sheet that is signed at the polling unit should basically show it now that IREV is already posting. As of this morning, I believe IREV had posted 95.4% of polling units, leaving very minute number of polling units that have not posted. That said, Electoral Law Section 62 and 65 both does not exclude INEC from just transmitting electronically, and then it does not approximate transmission to the determination of the database mentioned in Electoral Act Section 62(1) and 2. 62(2) actually specifically mentions that after election results have been collated and announced, INEC shall maintain a publicly addressable database of elections. After, not during, not real time. Rather, INEC went on TV, and I think a couple of their overzealous ICT officials and communication officials, and promised that IREV will suddenly post data directly from beavers, over 176,000 beavers across Nigeria in real time. It's not possible. We live in a country where if I'm trying to post a transaction, if I'm sent any funds, either by my relative, my wife, or my colleagues, it takes me a day for me to even receive the transaction in my bank account. Talk less of a country where we cannot, the nation's capital, with all its infrastructure, add a 2, 3, 4 hour blackout 1 week before the election that no cell phone calls are going through, where I easily have 90% of my calls being dropped and I cannot hear clearly. Even when I got into, when you now go into the interlands area, the rural areas, you can barely receive a call. And then you are telling me that these 176,000 devices will simultaneously, real time, post data directly to a website, which, by the way, we do not have guarantee of its security. So I think INEC overpromised, and it should not have. INEC basically should have stuck to the Electoral Act that says, one, after you finish the election, you post, you sign at the polling unit, every party keeps their result sheet, and then you now transmit the result manually and electronically as required by Electoral Act Section 65. And days after announcement, after collation, public announcement, you now continue to maintain and provide that data in a publicly addressable database, which is called IREF. But that requirement is not real time, and the fact that we've been able to achieve 95.4% upload about 2 weeks to the end of the election definitely is a win, going by the provisions of the Act of the Electoral Act that calls for that posting to be done in reasonable time, which some people have even interpreted as 6 months. In this case, we've achieved 95%
I want to ask you one quick question.
2 weeks. Yes.
Oluwagbemi, one quick question. Do we need a Goodluck Jonathan school for? Do we need a Goodluck Jonathan school for sore losers?
I think Nigerian politicians, first and foremost, should understand that participating in democracy itself, presenting yourself as a candidate, 1 out of 208 million people, is a victory in itself. And we should not go into an election with a mindset that only us can win. And if we don't win, then the election was not free and fair. And by the way, I have to step back and also say that this is not to say that election is perfect. In fact, the United States of America, which we all hold up as a beacon of democracy, experienced hacking And candidates, even the Donald Trump.
If you can hear me, we need to leave the conversation here now. Michael Oluwagbemi, political analyst, we must thank you for your time on the program. Thank you.